Imagine being told you have 2 months to live. Now imagine the one person who vowed to love you in sickness and in health sees it not as a tragedy, but as an inconvenience. This isn't just a story about a devastating diagnosis. It's a story about the deepest betrayal, the surprising kindness of strangers, and a comeback that no one, especially my ex-husband, ever saw coming. Stay with me, because what happens at the end is something you will not want to miss. My name is Emily, and for 10 years, my world revolved around Mark. We weren't just married, we were a unit, or so I thought. But our unit had a third, silent partner, his mother, Deborah. We lived in our own small condo in Cleveland, but her influence was a shadow that touched everything. She'd call him 10 times a day, offering advice he never needed but always took. Every decision, from what car we bought to where we vacationed, was filtered through her. I told myself it was just a son who loved his mother. I told myself I was strong enough to handle it. But over the years, the constant criticism and manipulation wore me down, leaving me feeling like a ghost in my own life, exhausted and invisible. The smell hit me the moment Deborah opened the door to her apartment. It was a sour mix of old grease, stale cigarette smoke, and something vaguely like spoiled milk. Her smile was tight, a mask of sweetness that never reached her cold eyes. "Emily, darling, I was beginning to think you'd forgotten about me." Piles of dirty dishes teetered precariously by the sink. Greasy smudges covered the kitchen counters, and a trail of crumbs led from the living room couch to the refrigerator. Mark just gave me a helpless shrug and immediately plopped down on the sofa next to his mother, turning on the TV. It was Saturday, my one day to rest, and this was my ritual, my unpaid job, cleaning up the chaos Deborah deliberately created, a weekly reminder of my place in the family hierarchy. My head was already throbbing, a dull ache that had become my constant companion. An hour later, I was on my hands and knees scrubbing a stubborn, sticky stain from the linoleum floor. The chemical smell of the cleaner burned my nose, and sweat trickled down my temples. I felt a wave of dizziness so intense the whole room tilted. I pushed myself up, steadying myself on the counter. "Ma," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Could you please just take out the trash? The bag is overflowing." He looked over from the TV, annoyed at the interruption. "In a minute, Em." But Deborah's voice cut in, sharp and syrupy. "Oh, let the boy rest, dear. He works so hard all week." A cold fury, sharp and clear, sliced through my exhaustion. I slowly pulled off the grimy rubber gloves, folded them neatly, and tossed them into the overflowing trash bag. "I'm going home," I announced. "You can finish up here." The look on Deborah's face, a flash of pure, venomous shock, was almost worth the years of silent suffering. I walked out without looking back, the sound of Deborah's shrill voice and Mark's panicked calls fading behind me. The crisp autumn air felt like a shock to my system. I just walked, with no destination in mind, my feet carrying me toward the riverfront park. The city noise seemed to melt away, replaced by the rustle of golden leaves and the gentle lapping of the water. I found an empty bench overlooking the Cuyahoga River and sat down, letting the cool breeze wash over my face. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I felt a sense of peace, but then a strange thought bubbled up, unsettling me to my core. I was happy. I was happy because Mark and his mother weren't here. What did that say about my marriage? That my only moment of peace was found in my husband's absence? The thought was so overwhelming the world around me began to spin. The blue sky and the grey water blurred into one, and a deep humming darkness pulled me under. I woke up to the gentle pressure of fingers on my wrist and a calm, deep voice. "Ma'am, can you hear me? Just stay still. An ambulance is on its way." My eyes fluttered open. A man was kneeling beside me, his face etched with concern. He wore a crisp dress shirt and had kind eyes. He'd thrown his suit jacket over me like a blanket. The distant wail of a siren grew closer, a sound that seemed to be coming from a million miles away. I tried to sit up, embarrassed and confused, but a wave of nausea pushed me back down. "I'm a doctor," he said, his voice reassuring. "My name is Leo. You just passed out. "Don't worry, we'll get you checked out." I could only nod, surrendering to the weakness in my body, as the paramedics arrived, their movements efficient and professional. The last thing I saw before they closed the ambulance doors was the doctor's worried face, watching as they drove me away into a future that was about to be irrevocably changed. The hospital was a world of bleached white walls, the constant low beep of machinery, and the sterile scent of antiseptic. I was in a room with 2 other women sharing stories to pass the time. It was strangely comforting. The next 2 days were a blur of blood tests, scans, and questions. So many questions. Finally, a familiar face appeared at my door. It was the doctor from the park, Dr. Leo Vance. He wasn't smiling this time. He pulled up a chair, his expression sombre. "Emily," he began, and I felt a cold dread creep up my spine. "We got your test results back. I'm so sorry. It's an aggressive form of pancreatic cancer. It's very advanced." The words hung in the air, unreal and impossible. He explained it all in a calm, clinical voice, but all I could hear was a rushing sound in my ears. He said I had maybe 2-3 months left. The world didn't just tilt this time. It shattered into a million pieces. I finally managed to call Mark that evening. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. "Mark," I whispered, my voice hoarse from unshed tears. "What is it, Emily? Mum's been calling me all day. She's furious. You really made a scene." I took a deep breath, the smell of hospital food filling my lungs. "Mark, I'm in the hospital. The doctors, they found something. It's bad." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I waited for words of comfort, of fear, of love. Instead, what I got was, "So, when are they letting you out? I was hoping to eat the leftover meatloaf tonight, but I can't find it." The casual cruelty of his question struck me harder than the diagnosis itself. He wasn't hearing me. He didn't care. In that moment, I understood that I wasn't just sick. I was completely, utterly alone. The next day, Mark showed up. He looked awkward and out of place, clutching a wilted bouquet of carnations from the hospital gift shop. He pecked my cheek, his lips cool and distant. "So, what's the plan?" he asked, as if we were discussing a broken appliance. "Are they giving you medicine or something?" I just stared at him, numb. Before I could answer, his phone buzzed. It was his mother. He stepped into the hallway to take the call, but the walls were thin. I heard every word. "What do you mean, terminal?" "No, Mum, of course I won't." "Yes, I know. The mortgage." "A hospice?" "OK, I'll ask." He walked back in, refusing to meet my eyes. "Mum thinks. She thinks maybe some fresh air would do you good. Remember your grandma's old farmhouse in Havenwood? It's quiet there. You could rest." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a verdict. They were banishing me, sending me away to die so I wouldn't be an inconvenience. I agreed. A part of me was too tired to fight, too broken to argue. Another, smaller part of me realised that spending my last days in that silent old house was infinitely better than spending them with a husband and mother-in-law who were already treating me like I was dead. Mark was visibly relieved. He even managed a weak smile. "That's great, Em. It's for the best." The morning he came to pick me up, he had already packed a single suitcase for me. Not our shared memories, not photos, just some clothes and toiletries, a neat little package of a life about to be discarded. As I signed my discharge papers, I saw Dr. Vance at the nurse's station. He looked at me, then at Mark, and his eyes were filled with a deep, sorrowful understanding. He knew what was happening, and the pity in his gaze was the only real human connection I'd felt in days. The drive to Havenwood was 2 hours of suffocating silence. Mark kept the radio on, tapping his fingers on the steering wheel, a man desperate to be anywhere else. I watched the city skyline recede in the rearview mirror, then the sprawling suburbs until finally we were surrounded by flat, empty farmland under a grey sky. The farmhouse stood exactly as I remembered it, paint peeling, shutters askew, a lonely sentinel in a field of overgrown weeds. Mark carried my suitcase to the porch. He didn't even step inside. "Well, here you are," he said, the false cheer in his voice making me sick. I'll call you, and I'll bring groceries next week." He leaned in for a kiss, but I turned my head. He drove away in a cloud of dust, not even looking back. I was left alone on the porch of a house filled with ghosts, the rusty key cold in my hand. The air inside was thick with the scent of dust and time. A fine grey powder coated every surface, and the silence was absolute. I sank onto the lumpy, floral print sofa, the one my grandma used to sit on, and for the first time since the diagnosis, I let myself cry. I wept for the life I thought I'd have, for the man I thought I'd married, for the utter desolation of my new reality. I must have fallen asleep because I was startled awake by a hesitant knock on the door. I wiped my eyes and creaked the door open. A man stood on the porch, his face weathered and kind, his flannel shirt worn thin. "Emily? Emily Parker? It's me, Billy. Billy Jensen." We were in the same class. Recognition dawned. It was my childhood friend, the boy I used to catch frogs with in the creek behind this very house. He looked older, tired, but his smile was the same. "I saw the car," he said. "Figured it had to be you. Welcome home." Billy's wife, Sarah, arrived a few minutes later with a casserole dish warm to the touch and their 3 young daughters in tow. The girls stared at me with wide, curious eyes. Sarah's hug was warm and genuine, a simple act of kindness that felt like a lifeline. They didn't ask too many questions. They just started cleaning, opening windows to let the fresh air in, dusting off surfaces, their easy chatter filling the lonely silence of the house. For the first time in so long, I felt like a person, not a problem to be managed. That evening, sitting at my grandma's old kitchen table, I told them everything. The diagnosis, Mark, his mother. I expected pity, but what I saw in their eyes was fierce, protective anger. "That coward," Billy muttered, shaking his head. "You don't deserve that, Emily." "Nobody does." Sarah just took my hand, her grip firm and steady. "You're not alone now," she said, and for the first time, I believed it. Over the next few days, I found a strange rhythm in Havenwood. Billy and Sarah's family unofficially adopted me. The girls would bring me wildflowers, and Sarah would drop off fresh eggs and milk. One evening, Billy was talking about his dream. He wanted to start a small, free-range chicken farm, selling organic eggs to restaurants in the city. "It's a good plan," he said, staring off into the distance, "but it takes money to start. Money we just don't have." That's when an idea, a wild and liberating idea, took root in my mind. The next morning, I drove to the nearest town with a bank. Mark and I had a joint savings account, money we were saving for a new car. His car. I walked up to the teller, my heart pounding, and withdrew my half. Every single penny. It felt like I was taking back a piece of my life he had stolen. When I got back, I walked over to Billy and Sarah's. I found them in the kitchen, poring over feed catalogues and budget spreadsheets. I placed the thick envelope of cash on the table between them. "This is for you," I said. "For the farm." They stared at the money, then at me, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief. "Emily, we can't," Billy said, his voice thick with emotion. "This is your money." "What am I going to do with it, Billy?" I asked, a sad smile on my face. "Buy a fancy coffin. I want this to happen. I want to see something grow. Please, let me do this." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes as she stood up and wrapped me in another one of her life-affirming hugs. It wasn't an act of charity, it was an act of defiance. If I was going to die, I was going to leave behind a legacy of creation, not just a trail of sorrow. Back in Cleveland, Dr. Leo Vance couldn't get Emily out of his mind. The haunted look in her eyes, the weak-willed husband at her side. It all felt deeply wrong. On a hunch, he called a former colleague, a leading researcher in oncology in Baltimore. He described Emily's case. "It's a long shot, Leo," his friend said, "but we're starting a new experimental trial. It's aggressive, the side effects are brutal, but we've seen some promising results. If you can find your patient, There might be a chance. Hope, fierce and urgent, surged through Leo. He drove to Emily's condo, but it was empty. A neighbour, a woman with kind eyes and a curious nature, was watering her plants in the hallway. "Oh, the Parkers," she said, lowering her watering can. "He took her away a few weeks ago. Said she was going to her family's old place in the country to rest, somewhere called Havenwood." It was all Leo needed. He got in his car and started driving east, a desperate man on a mission of mercy. It was late when Leo's headlights cut through the darkness of Havenwood's main street. The town was asleep. He had no address, just a name. He saw a light on in a small house and decided to take a chance. A man answered the door, wary and protective. It was Billy. "I'm looking for Emily Parker," Leo said, his voice tired but steady. "I'm her doctor." A few minutes later, he was sitting in Emily's dusty living room, the woman he'd been searching for, staring at him as if he were an apparition. He explained everything, the trial, the risk, the fragile sliver of hope. "It won't be easy, Emily," he said, his gaze intense. "It might be the hardest thing you've ever done, but you have to fight. You deserve the chance to fight." For the first time, a spark ignited in her eyes, a flicker of the fire she thought had been extinguished forever. The fight wasn't over. The journey to Baltimore was the beginning of everything. We talked for hours in the car, not as doctor and patient, but as two people who had found each other at crossroads of life and death. He told me about the wife he had lost to a car accident years ago, a loss that had driven him to dedicate his life to saving others. I told him about my quiet, invisible life with Mark, a life I was now desperate to leave behind. By the time we arrived at the clinic, a new, unspoken bond had formed between us. The clinic was modern and bright, a place of determined optimism. My new doctor, a brilliant and intense man named Dr. Matthews, laid out the plan. "This is going to feel like a war inside your body, Emily," he warned. "Your only job is to endure. Let us do the rest." I looked at Leo, who squeezed my hand, and I nodded. I was ready. The treatment was hell. It was a relentless chemical assault that ravaged my body, leaving me weak, nauseous, and stripped down to my very essence. There were days when the pain was so immense, I prayed for the end. But Leo was always there. He sat by my bed for hours, reading to me when I couldn't focus, telling me funny stories from his residency, or just holding my hand in silence. He was my anchor in the storm, a constant presence that reminded me what I was fighting for. Slowly, miraculously, the tide began to turn. The tumours started to shrink. The blood test came back with better numbers. The war inside me was still raging, but for the first time, it felt like my side was winning. The seasons changed outside my window, from the green of summer to the fiery gold of autumn, and I was still here. I was still fighting. A year passed. Back in Cleveland, Mark was growing impatient. The divorce had been finalised months ago. Emily had filed from the hospital, and he hadn't contested it. Assuming it was a dying wish, he'd had to sell their condo to split the assets, and he was now living back at home with his mother. Deborah's presence was more suffocating than ever. "It's been a year, Mark," she'd say every day. "She's obviously gone. That farmhouse is just sitting there, rotting. It's rightfully yours now. You were her husband." Her greed was a constant dripping poison. Mark knew she was right. Emily must be gone. He had to go to Havenwood, get a death certificate from the local town hall, and start the process of claiming the property. He deserved it, he told himself. He had been through a lot too. This was his chance to finally get his own life back on track. The drive to Havenwood felt different this time. Last year, he was a man dropping off a burden. Today, he was an heir claiming his inheritance. He and Deborah drove together, her constant stream of instructions filling the car. "First, we go to the town hall. If they don't have the certificate, we'll check the church. Then we'll find her grave. You should take a picture of it for the lawyers. Proof." Mark just nodded, the thought of seeing Emily's gravestone making him feel a strange, hollow ache. They pulled into the sleepy town. But something was off. The main street was decorated with white ribbons. Music drifted from a small community hall. It looked like the whole town was celebrating something. Probably some local festival, Deborah sniffed, dismissing it. They found the small, peaceful cemetery on a hill just outside of town. They walked through the iron gates, their city shoes crunching on the gravel path. They began to scan the headstones, looking for her name. "This is ridiculous," Deborah complained after a few minutes. Where could she be? Suddenly, a fluffy, four-legged creature came bounding toward them, yapping excitedly. It was a Newfoundland puppy, big and clumsy and full of joy. "Get away, you beast!" Deborah shrieked. Mark just stared. The puppy was purebred, expensive. What was it doing here? Then he heard a voice that was impossible, a voice that should have been silenced a year ago. "Winston, come here, you silly boy." He looked up, and the world stopped. Walking toward them, down the path, was Emily. She wasn't sick. She wasn't a ghost. She was radiant, glowing with health, her hair grown back thick and wavy, and she was wearing a beautiful floor-length ivory dress. Emily stopped dead when she saw them, her smile faltering for just a second. The puppy, Winston, ran to her side, nudging her hand. Behind her, a small crowd of people appeared, all dressed in their Sunday best. Billy and Sarah were there, their daughters acting as flower girls in matching pink dresses. And beside Emily, his arm sliding protectively around her waist, was Dr. Leo Vance. He was wearing a handsome dark suit. It took Mark a moment to process the impossible scene. The dress, the flowers, the guests, the man at her side. This wasn't a memorial. It was a wedding. His ex-wife, the woman he had sent away to die, was standing in a cemetery on her wedding day, looking more beautiful and alive than he had ever seen her. "Emily," Mark breathed, the word a choked whisper. You're alive." Deborah simply gaped, her hand clutching at her chest as if she might faint. Emily's expression hardened, the brief shock replaced by a calm, steely resolve. "I am," she said, her voice clear and strong. "No thanks to you." Leo stepped forward slightly, his presence a solid wall of protection. "I think you've overstayed your welcome," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You came here looking for a grave. As you can see, you won't find one. Now please leave." Billy took a step forward too, his friendly face now hard as granite. "You heard him. Get off her property." Mark was frozen, paralysed by a tidal wave of shock, shame, and a bewildering sense of loss. He had thrown away a diamond, and he hadn't even realised it until this very moment. Deborah, ever the fighter, found her voice. "Her property? You were her husband. This is your right," she screeched, pointing a trembling finger at Mark. Sarah just laughed, a rich, genuine sound. "He stopped being her husband the day he abandoned her," she said simply. "Now are you going to leave on your own, or does my husband need to escort you?" The sight of Billy, a man who worked with his hands every day, cracking his knuckles, was enough. Deborah grabbed Mark's arm, her face purple with rage and humiliation, and dragged him back toward the car. They stumbled away, a symphony of failure, their pathetic quest for a dead woman's property ending in the face of her triumphant, vibrant life. Emily watched them go, took a deep breath, and turned back to the man she loved, leaving the ghost of her past behind her for good. The wedding reception was held in Billy and Sarah's backyard, under strings of twinkling lights. The chicken farm was thriving, a testament to Emily's act of faith. The whole town seemed to be there, a boisterous, loving crowd that had become her true family. Laughter and music filled the air. Later, when things had quieted down, Leo led Emily to a quiet spot by the fence. "I have one more wedding present for you," he said, his eyes sparkling. He whistled, and the Newfoundland puppy, Winston, came bounding over, a big red bow tied loosely around his neck. "You told me once, on the drive to Baltimore, that your childhood dream was to have a huge, fluffy dog," Leo said softly. "You said your grandma never allowed it." Tears filled Emily's eyes as she knelt down and hugged the puppy, burying her face in his soft fur. It was the fulfillment of a long-forgotten dream, a beautiful symbol of her new life. As the stars came out over Havenwood, Emily sat with Leo, her head on his shoulder, watching their friends and family celebrate. She thought about the woman she was a year ago, weak, invisible and hopeless. She had to go to the edge of death to finally learn how to live. She had to be abandoned to find where she truly belonged. The journey had been brutal, a trial by fire that had burned away everything that wasn't real, everything that didn't matter. But what emerged from the ashes was stronger, happier, and more love than she had ever thought possible. She looked at Leo, at the community that had embraced her, at the goofy puppy asleep at her feet, and she knew with a certainty that filled her entire being that she was finally home. Mark drove back to Cleveland in stunned silence, the sound of his mother's furious ranting just a buzz in the background. He kept seeing Emily's face, not the pale, sick woman he had left behind, but the vibrant, joyful bride he had seen today. He had made the biggest mistake of his life, not because he had lost property, but because he had failed to see the incredible woman who had been by his side all along. He was trapped in a life of his own making, a perpetual child, tethered to a mother who would never let him grow. He had chosen comfort over character, convenience over love, and now he was left with nothing but the bitter taste of regret. His future was a cramped room in his mother's house, while Emily's was an open field under a sky full of stars. A few months later, a postcard arrived at Deborah's apartment, addressed to Mark. There was no return address. On the front was a picture of a stunning snow-capped mountain range in Switzerland. On the back, in elegant handwriting, it said, "Life is a beautiful journey. So glad I finally started mine. Hope you're well. Emily." It was a simple message, devoid of anger or malice. It was a message of pure, unadulterated freedom. Mark stared at it for a long time, the image of the vast, open mountains a stark contrast to the four walls of his mother's living room. He had sent her away to a tiny, forgotten corner of the world to die, and in return she had gone out and inherited the entire world, leaving him behind in his self-made cage. Life in Havenwood was everything Emily had never known she wanted. It was simple, yet rich with meaning. She and Leo worked together at the small-town clinic. He as the doctor, she as the practice manager. Their farmhouse, once a place of sorrow, was now filled with warmth, laughter, and the constant, happy chaos of an enormous dog. They worked in their garden, hosted barbecues for Billy and Sarah, and took long walks in the woods. Emily learned that strength wasn't about enduring mistreatment silently. It was about having the courage to walk away and build something new. She learned that family wasn't about obligation. It was about the people who show up, who lift you up, and who fight for you when you can't fight for yourself. Billy and Sarah's farm, Emily's meadow, became a local success story. They supplied eggs and produce to half a dozen upscale restaurants in Cleveland and opened a popular stand at the farmers' market. Their daughters grew and their family thrived, their future secured by an act of kindness born from despair. Every time Emily saw them, saw the fruits of their hard work, she felt a profound sense of peace. She hadn't just saved herself. She had helped create a new beginning for her friends, weaving her story into the fabric of their own. It was a beautiful living legacy, a testament to the idea that even in the darkest of times, one small act of hope can plant a garden. Years from now, the town of Havenwood would tell the story of the city woman who came to die but chose to live instead. They would talk about the doctor who crossed the state to save her, and the community that welcomed them both with open arms. It became a local legend, a reminder that miracles aren't always loud, divine interventions. Sometimes a miracle is just the stubborn, unrelenting refusal to give up. It's the courage to accept help, the grace to offer it, and the profound realization that the most beautiful parts of life often begin right at the point where we believe it's all over. Emily's life was that miracle, a quiet but powerful testament to the resilience of the human heart. In the end, Mark and his mother didn't just lose a piece of property, they lost the chance to witness a resurrection. The ultimate plot twist wasn't a clever reveal. It was life itself, stubbornly and beautifully refusing to follow their cruel script. Emily's story teaches us that our deepest wounds can become our greatest strengths, and that true love often finds us when we finally learn to love ourselves enough to demand better. She was sentenced to death, but she chose a life sentence instead, one filled with joy, purpose, and a very, very big dog. If Emily's incredible story of resilience and rebirth moved you, please show your support by hitting that like button, subscribing for more unforgettable stories, and sharing your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Have you ever seen someone turn their life around against all odds? Let us know.